Hey guys, Mechanite here, and it's time for a sequel that has been long overdue. A long time ago, I made a video called "What if all future Paradox Pokemon were like Allium and Valiant?" and I combined them with another Pokemon. And today we're doing that, but with the past Paradox Pokemon, making them common ancestors. I even created an entire spin-off game concept that I nicknamed Pokémon Time Saviors. Basically, you're on an island off the coast of Paldea, and you use the Terra Shards to create weapons that you use to fight Pokémon from the very distant past that came out of black holes, even further back than the Paradox Pokemon you find in Scarlet and Violet, and there would also be way in the future ones, which are actually the ones we discussed in the other video. So it all comes full circle. I've given all of these Pokemon like phases, different battle phases, different battle mechanics. So you would get like swords made of Terra Energy, and they would work better depending on what Pokemon you're fighting, because type matchups. I think it's quite cool. So let me just explain it. And if any of you have like the skill and know-how to make this into a proper game, go ahead. You don't need my permission, just do it. Right, so to start off, we got Great Trunk, which is a fusion of Donphan and Dugong. I made because Donphan, elephants and then seals are actually really closely related. So I thought this would be better than just going with the basic option of Copperaja or Mamoswine. And besides, if they're way in the past, they should be weirder. Alright, so it is an ice ground type. So you find it on a rock in the middle of a lake. A whirlpool then sucks you and the lake all into it, and you reappear in the past. And now there's an island in the middle of the lake with you on, and other past Paradox Pokemon. So you got to defeat all these, time Pokemon in order to send the region back to normal. In Phase 1, it summons freezing water geysers that burst out of the ground. Maybe if there was a temperature mechanic, it would do something to that. And in Phase 2, the island splits in half, and then fish Pokemon, leap up at you, like Basculegion. And then in Phase 3, the rivers freeze. And then this guy begins to run at you, and it begins to snow, and all the trees are, falling down as it happens. So, and then, in Phase 3, the head is surrounded by orange crystals, and they've got the fighting Terra symbol on the trunk, and it also launches orange fists at you. You could fight these in any order, but a lot of them are stronger than others, so there is a suggested order, a bit like in Scarlet and Violet. Yeah, so at the end, the age-old Terra mechanic, a black hole opens maybe, and a bunch of crystals come out and add on to the Pokemon, completely changing what weapons they should be using against them. I quite like it, and I also like the idea of it being like Legends Arceus, where you're the one who's fighting the Pokemon. Maybe you could even have weapons that are you've got the old Pokeballs that are wooden, and then you could also have futuristic Pokeballs that you use to attack. I don't know. I'm making this up as I go, to be honest, most of this. However, I quite like it. And before you ask, Iron Valiant would be one of the bosses, which, yeah, you could say is a bit unoriginal. But also this entire concept was based off them, so it still makes sense. Alright, next up, we got Scream Tongue. Oh yeah, the names change because they're technically different species. So this one is Jigglypuff with Lickitung, and it's a poison normal type. You find it in a cave filled with mushrooms. It pulls the root of one of the mushrooms, and the floor collapses. The cave then gets covered in other Paradox Pokemon. So not just past Paradox Pokemon, just other Paradox Pokemon. And you can also pull the mushrooms to reveal tunnels throughout the cave system. In phase 1, it spits green balls of goo at you, and you have to follow trails of slime in order to find it. It leaps across the walls when you do find it. In phase 2, it runs through the tunnels, and you have to chase it, and it jumps at your face and whips you with its tongue. In phase 3, the crystals come and they form a small, mech suit around it, with the fairy terror symbol. And then it throws mushrooms and it spits out terror shards. This one is probably the boss you should fight first, but all the bosses I would say are sort of balanced. Alright, next up, Flutterclaws, which is Haunter mixed with Mischievous. You can see with the design, I definitely took a lot from Haunter, making it so that Haunter was even the main one, and Mischievous looks like it was the one that was added. It's even got, the scales Fluttermane had. Alright, so you find this one in, a haunted, very dark forest. It creates a ghostly black hole and sucks everything in. You end up in a creepy autumn forest with dark orange leaves surrounded by scared Paradox Pokemon, all scared of Flutterclaws. Oh, and it's a Ghost Dark type. It can join the club with Sableye and Spiritomb. In phase 1, its hands fly around the entire forest, pulling tricks on you and throwing rocks. And the trees will sway towards you, smacking you. In phase 2, it moves around plasma orbs, so it'll just grab them and then move them around. And they distort the view, so it makes everything look really warped. If you get too close, they'll let out a bunch of tiny hands that'll attack you. In phase 3, its hands coat over in the crystals with the Stellar Terror symbol. If you don't know what Stellar is, and I don't blame you, it's still pretty new, then it's the new type that can only be accessed through terrestrializing. The orbs now distort, and they pull the things around them like mini black holes, and it punches you and controls shards, so it'll create waves of the shards. I also think this could make just a cool anime episode when fighting all these guys. Game Freak, get on that. Next up, Sliverbuzz, which is Volcarona and Flygon. Everyone always wanted Flygon to be bug type, and I get it, so this is sort of a spiritual successor to that. It's bug dragon type, and you find it on a sandy cliff, and it summons a blue flame that explodes and engulfs everything around you. You reappear at the top of a sand mound covered in fossils. The top is flat and rocky with one giant skull. In phase 1, it buzzes around, creating small blue flames that erupt upon impact. They're really small, but when they hit the floor, they're like a massive fiery geyser. And they'll occasionally bring a giant wall of the tiny blue flames behind it. And you can't even block it with a shield or anything, you have to go into the skull. In phase 2, it'll occasionally go down to the floor to swing its head at you and send small blue mouths at you. In phase 3, it picks up and drops rocks down, and you've got to be on your toes because sometimes they'll explode into blue flames. And then in phase 4, because not all these Pokemon have the same amount of phases, the wings get coated over in fire terror crystals, and the blue flames now fall as it flies, along with bones covered in the crystals, which I think is pretty cool. So, let's move on to the next one. And coincidentally, all of the Pokemon are designed, I think, a year ago now, for that future Paradox video do fit pretty well, and I can imagine movesets for them, if you know what I mean. Movesets, you know what I mean, them attacking you. Right. This is Brute Jungle, which is Brute Bonnet, except it's a Moongus with Tropius, and it's a Grass Dark type. You find it in the middle of a giant bamboo jungle. It makes all the bamboo collapse around it, sending you back to the past when there was less bamboo, and you see in the trees hordes of Paradox Pokemon viewing and cheering like it's a gladiator battle or something. In phase 1, it runs around, jumping off bamboo and chucking spinning bananas at you that curve like boomerangs. In phase 2, it controls the bamboo stalks so they go down into the ground and then poke straight up when you're beneath them to hit you, and it also begins to whack you with its wings, but that don't really hurt. The wings are extremely thin. In phase 3, it tries to peck you, and if it misses, it'll strike its entire tree head down. It also begins to actually fly and drop banana bunches, that when they hit the ground, they split into 3 bananas that just keep bouncing. And then, in phase 4, the Pokeball head gets covered in dragon terror, making it look like a great ball, which I think is pretty clever. And then, its bananas begin to explode on impact, and occasionally, it'll crash straight down from the air, letting out a shockwave that doesn't destroy anything, but it does hurt. Right, next up. This is the most recent one. This project has been years in the making, so you could probably see my skills go up as we went between these. This is Sandy Anomaly, electric ground version of Sandy Shocks, except it's with Steelix. This is probably the one whose design changed the most, and I actually quite like that. Especially the head with the just 2 heads on its chin, and the mohawk. I think this design is maybe one of the best. Though we do have some more epic designs later on. So you found it on the mountain ledge, next to a ruined building. It begins to pull the remains toward it with its magnet. And then, as it's covered in all the debris, it lets out a magnetic shockwave. And you appear on the same ledge, except it's snowy and covered in, poking out iron ore. In phase 1, it digs through the mountain like a worm, where it'll poke out and try to hit you. And then, if it misses, it'll occasionally launch a magnet wave from its tail that actually pulls you towards it and hurts, which is pretty unique for an attack. In phase 2, the snow melts and lightning crackles where it's about to emerge, so you can tell where it's about to come out, but decoys will appear, so you might think it's going to appear in one place, and then the lightning suddenly crackles and it bursts out. And then in phase 3, it'll occasionally levitate iron ores with its tail and chuck them at you. It also begins to launch magnet waves from the eyes, so every single one of the eyes, it can also launch magnet waves out of. In phase 4, it gets covered in the steel terror, and it begins to launch off shards that become metal rocks it can levitate when they land. So as soon as the little shards land, they become the massive rocks like the iron ore that it can also throw at you if it runs out of iron ore. Right. Next up, we got sort of the final boss. The idea is there's actually 2 final bosses for this game, and there's also 2 mid-bosses that would happen before it. A future and a past one. And once you beat one of the final bosses, the region would already change and all the past ones will be gone. Or all the future ones will be gone, but the rest would still remain. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. First, we got to check out the mid-boss. This is Roaring Crescent, and the other mid-boss will be Iron Valiant, which actually is suited really well for fighting when you think about it. It's got that weapon. This is a flying psychic type. You find it at the top of a snowy peak. It creates a whirlwind that sends you back in time, and it's almost completely different. It's volcanic, and the area is basically the same, except for lava geysers and huge cracks in the ground you can fall into. In the middle is also a huge lava pit, because volcano. In phase 1, it slowly circles around the centre, sending rocks flying at you, so it'll keep at a distance. You might want a bow and arrow made of terror energy for this one. It roars, which sends up cracks in front of you, and if you didn't get hurt by the cracks, they'll explode in lava and smoke, so you got to watch out. Occasionally, it'll fly up and then swoop at you, scratching you before jumping back to stay at a distance. Your best chance to attack is when it swoops. You can, knock it down. Alright, Next up, oh, and by the way, I just had to do Metagross elements. I really wanted to do like Tyranitar or Dragonite, but these two are actually a really common pair, so I feel like it just made sense, especially with all the other much more out there decisions I made of the other fusions. So, let me show you this guy. In Phase 2, it flaps its wings, sending like shrapnel and debris flying at you. And then, if they miss, then they'll stop in the air and come straight back to Roaring Crescent. And when they swoop, they don't just scratch you, they like scratch you and then they punch you, which sends you like flying upwards. Right, now, Phase 3. The lava coming out of the geysers will stop in a ball that either explodes, chases you before like falling back into the earth if it takes too long, or it'll turn into like a minigun, shoot lots of little bits before it runs out. Also, little Beldums made of rock will now fly around the battlefield. They won't chase you, but they will shoot around fireballs from their eyes. Now, for Phase 4. Its claws and head crest get covered in the rock terror energy. Wait, let me think. How many of these have there been? I think we might have actually had the perfect amount for every type to be represented in each terror. That is pretty impressive, you got to admit. In Phase 4, its claws and head crest get covered in the rock terror, and it runs at you. As it does, the floor around it will crack and lava bursts out. So the style of fighting has changed completely. Instead of at a distance, it now gets really up close and personal. It swings its claws at you, headbutts you, and even raises the magma up. It can do any of the like explode, chase you, or things that it did before. Now, instead of the Beldums, there are magma rock metangs that shoot flamethrowers from their hands. Alright, now for one of the two final bosses. You're the final boss of the past and the final boss of the future. And the question that's lingered in the community is why are the past forms of the legendary beast not combined like it looked like they would? Well, I made them, so then, well, we could say that they did exist. However, they look quite different to the drawings. So the future boss would also be the three Swords of Justice future forms combined. This is Sweeter. All three legendary beasts combined, and it's a dragon type. You find at the centre of a massive cave system. And the cave system will be like mythical with like the terror energy. And also like just black holes. Just everywhere, because why not? And then it'll burst and everything like warp and turn red. You re-emerge in the crater at the surface, with a massive black hole at the centre, surrounded by watching past Paradox Pokémon. So, instead of the just Paradox Pokémon, it's only past Paradox Pokémon. Because this is like the final pass boss. And while like the question time makes it so that basically all Pokemon will be dragged there, you know, it's the final pass battle and needs to have that impact. Right, so in this one it'll walk around regally, shooting beams of lightning, fire or water, depending on which would be best against your weapons, like which would be blocked the worst. You'll also stop, sending massive cracks at you, and then the cracks will burst with thorns that just stay there, making the battlefield more dangerous the longer as it goes on. They also whip you with their tails, and Eevees that are like more dragon-like, because, you know, it's the past, run out and try and tackle you, trying to like combo you with Sweetie. And also the black hole, if you get too close, it'll like start sucking you in. Alright, now, in Phase 2, when it whips you, it'll now begin to leave, like, smoke behind that blocks the screen. The black hole grows, and now it'll just begin sucking things in, like rocks from the ground and lava. Now, when the thorns are poking out of the ground, they'll explode if they're left for too long. Rushes of water will appear from the side, sending you tumbling towards a black hole. When they get really close to the centre, they'll either freeze into like a ramp that sends you flying into it, or evaporating into an explosion of steam. And then after this Pokemon's done the water, electric, or fire beams, dragon energy will burst up out of the ground, and it'll like rain on you that hurts, and the beams are even larger and harder to dodge. In phase 3, the black hole gets even bigger than before and begins sucking in even more, so now you might have to actually like dodge floating bits of rock. As Pokemon now runs instead of walking, you know it's getting serious now, and it creates smaller clones of itself made from the dragon energy that run around and spit balls of fire, electricity, ice, and steam. They knock you back a lot, so they might not do the most damage, but they'll send you flying backwards. Fireballs now rain from the sky always, and they explode on impact. Lightning begins to crackle out of the black hole. So now we got the water rushing in from the edges, fire from the sky, and lightning from the black hole. And it's only going to get worse from here, because in phase 4, it gets split into 3 parts: volcanic, a crackling lightning desert, and raging rapids. And when it gets near the black hole, it levitates up. Each one has their own like things you have to dodge in them. And water will no longer rush from the side, but the EVs are back, and now they can fake out a tackle. Rhysuite spits a storm of spikes, that if they miss, they'll gather into a ball and explode. Now, phase 5. No said you could fight these in any order, but these two, this one and the future one, have to be the final ones. And for good reason. Because it gets 2 times bigger. All the floor disappears, and you're left having to parkour between floating rocks of ice, sand, and just stone and magma. You got to dodge crackling lightning travelling from each area, magma explosions, and water rays and dragon energy balls orbiting this massive black hole. Now, Rhysuite, the massive black hole, brings out all the terror energy, and it combines into Rhysuite. It gains a crest of the lightning terror energy on their face. But also, they become like a Hydra, 2 extra necks with two extra heads, and they're made of the fire and water terror energy. So now, instead of choosing which one's best, it'll fire water, lightning, and fire. And then, they can also shoot the spikes. Except now, the spikes will light you on fire, if it's from the fire head, freeze you from the water head, and blast you back from the lightning head. And the EVs are replaced with volcanic rocks and balls of steam that fly out from the black hole, sending you tumbling into the abyss. If you win, all the past Paradox Pokemon are gone. Except you might still need to beat the future final boss. I haven't created it because this is with the past Paradox Pokemon. Besides, it says common ancestors, so I can still do 3 with this one. I'm not breaking the rules. So maybe I'll like design that in a future short or something. Anyway, I might not be able to make a lot of videos soon because me and Mornite are going on like a massive road trip to try and find a dimension that Glitch Tonight can stay in. So, just a heads up, if you see me gone, I'm not dead. Well, I might be. You never know what's really happening out in the Warrior Net. But if you see me gone, don't worry too much.